I hope that we will choose to vote tomorrow on the infrastructure package in a bipartisan way, because it is landmark and needed legislation in fixing our nation's roads, bridges, railroads, our ports, our waterways, our electrical grid, our broadband network, and more. And I'm proud of the work the Senate has done on that. It will be a lasting bipartisan achievement to help the people we represent. It's going to improve the lives of all Americans. It's long-term spending to repair and replace and build assets that will last for decades. In doing so, it does make life better for people. It improves the life of the mom or dad who commutes to work and gets stuck in rush hour every day, would much rather be spending that time with their family. It improves the lives of people who are tired of those potholes. We all want to fix those potholes. We all hate them. One quick story there, when I'm asked how I got into public service, I often relate a story that when I was 7 or 8 years old, I remember driving with my mom on a rough road and telling her, "Someday, Mom, I want to fix these potholes." And she loved to tell that story. And that's my first exposure to what it could be like in public service, being able to fix potholes. Unfortunately, I then went on to public service at the federal level, in the House and the Senate and 2 Bush White Houses, and I never got to fix any potholes. Maybe this legislation is taking it full circle, because it will be fixing potholes, and it will make driving more safe. There's a story I want to relate. Recently in Cincinnati, Ohio, a guy named Howard Kruger was driving along I-75 South, and a big piece of concrete fell down from a bridge called the Western Viaduct, which is in terrible shape. It is one of our crumbling infrastructure projects we have to fix. A big piece of concrete hit his windshield. Thank God it didn't come through his windshield or kill him, but it shattered part of his windshield. He actually pulled off the road to go try to find the concrete to get it off the road for someone else, and to talk to the work crew that he assumed had dropped it. He went up and looked up. There was no work crew. It was just concrete falling from the bridge. Infrastructure. It matters to people. It is about safety. That truck driver who leaves his family to go on a long haul, he wants to have a road and a bridge that is safe. We recently had another accident in Ohio. It was on the Brent Spence Bridge, 2 trucks colliding. There's no shoulder left on that bridge, because it is carrying twice the number of vehicles it was meant to carry. Twice. It is functionally obsolete. And yet we've talked about it for 20 years and nothing has happened. After 20 years of talking about it, it's time to get something done. Here in this town, we've talked about infrastructure being improved for a long time, longer than 20 years. In fact, every president in modern times has proposed a big infrastructure package, and yet we never seem to get it done. Donald Trump actually proposed a $1.5 trillion infrastructure package. This one we're talking about today is $548 billion. He's a developer. He understands the need for infrastructure to make investments in hard assets, because it comes back to help the economy. So whether you're that truck driver, or whether you're that mom or dad, or whether you are somebody who lives in a rural and underserved area of our country because you don't have access to broadband, and you can finally now get it for your schoolwork or your work or for your health care, this is going to make a difference. It improves our overcapacity ports. Right now, our seaports, ships are backing up. If you're trying to get a product and you're a consumer and you're wondering why you not get it, that might be the reason. And guess what? It also invests in our overwhelmed southern border land ports with $3.85 billion to GSA and Customs and Border Protection. So for those of you concerned about the southern border and what's happening there, this infrastructure bill does help. It helps with our land ports and our seaports, and therefore helps Customs and Border Protection. We also have more for water infrastructure in this legislation. Clean drinking water. Lead pipes is a big issue in my home state of Ohio, as it is in other states. That is dealt with here. Remediation of the lead pipe danger and risk. So there's a lot in here that helps people, helps make their lives better. Very importantly for me, it also makes our economy more efficient. By fixing that bridge, by fixing that port. When you make the economy more efficient, the economy becomes more productive. When the economy is more productive, you have higher GDP. When you have higher GDP, you have more taxes coming into the economy than you would have had otherwise. That's what happens with infrastructure spending if it's done right. It's been made clear in poll after poll, this is something that actually brings our country together. According to a CNBC poll, 87% of Americans think it's important that we invest in improving our crumbling roads and bridges. A month or so later, a CBS poll found 87% of Americans support more federal spending on repairing roads and bridges. An Associated Press poll found 8 in 10 Americans, 80%, favor plans to increase funding for roads, bridges, and ports, and for pipes that supply drinking water. So, of course it's popular because it affects their lives, and they know it. And we need the investment right now. The American Society of Civil Engineers gives our infrastructure a C- and projects our economy stands to lose more than $10 trillion in GDP by 2039 should we fail to invest in repairs. We've fallen to 13th in the world in a report card on infrastructure, while China continues to spend much more than we do as a percent of their GDP on infrastructure. Why? They want to have a more efficient economy. We want to be able to compete and win the global competition. We, too, should be sure our infrastructure is up to speed. The need for fixing and repairing our nation's infrastructure is clear. It's no surprise, again, that these presidents, through the modern times, including Donald Trump, have suggested it. And frankly, I believe Donald Trump's advocacy for infrastructure helped change the way many in the Republican Party view these kinds of investments. This investment in repairing and upgrading our infrastructure will also have a real and lasting impact on our economy long term. There's a lot of discussion about inflation right now. Again, making the economy more efficient, more productive, growing the economy, that's what economists would call, by investing in hard assets and jobs, the supply side. These are supply-side investments. This is why economists have said, including Michael Strain of the Conservative American Enterprise Institute, this will be counterinflationary. That's important to note, too. By the way, this money's not going to be spent next year. It's not going to be spent hardly at all the next year. It's going to be spent over 5, 10, 15 years on these long-term projects. There was one recent study by the Association of Equipment Manufacturers finding that this legislation will create about 500,000 new jobs by 2024. So it's also about new jobs in industries ranging from construction to plumbing to electrical engineering to software development. Importantly, it accomplishes these goals while avoiding the tax hikes that will kill our economy, destroy jobs, and undermine our competitiveness around the world. That's why I started talking about the $3.5 trillion package that is wrong-headed, in my view. In part because of the spending, but in part because of what it would do to our economy at a time when we are trying to get back on our feet post-pandemic. We're going to provide billions in funding for some of our most pressing hard infrastructure needs, like $110 billion in new spending over the next 5 years to construct, rebuild, and maintain our roads and highways. I heard one of my colleagues say, well, only 24% of this money goes into roads and bridges and ports. That's just not true. The number actually is about 42% into roads and bridges alone. This is going to make a big difference in my home state of Ohio. We've got 123,000 miles of roads. Traffic congestion costs motorists an estimated $4.7 billion each year in lost time and wasted fuel, according to the American Society of Civil Engineers.
Enable, we hope, eventually, the tracks between New Haven and New York to be really reliable, to be maintained properly. But on every one of those transportation byways, there are people who depend on them, people who are going to work or visit their family. Those people are, at the end of the day, what this infrastructure serves. And the freight that will be on railroads or the goods and produce transported on our highways go to people. They serve our economy. They create jobs.
President?
The senator from Arizona.
Mr. President, I rise today as we approach a final Senate vote on historic legislation to invest in America's critical infrastructure, a bipartisan proposal that will make America stronger and safer, creating good-paying jobs and expand economic opportunities across the country. After months of negotiations, the Senate has now debated our bipartisan Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act for nearly 2 weeks in an open and legislative process. We've considered 22 amendments from both sides of the aisle, and voted to adopt many of those amendments. In the coming hours, the Senate will have the opportunity to approve legislation that meets the needs of everyday families, employers, and communities. For decades, American infrastructure has been crumbling. For decades, American families have asked Congress for infrastructure investment. And for decades, progress was blocked by partisan disagreements. Now, as the Senate prepares for a final vote, what will this historic legislation actually mean for the people we serve? Our bill will mean better roads by investing a historic $110 billion to repair and upgrade our roadways, bridges, and other major transportation projects. It will mean faster internet for people in more places by investing $65 billion to deploy high-speed broadband and help families afford internet service. It will mean cleaner, more reliable water sources by making the strongest investment in drinking water and wastewater infrastructure in U.S. history, including water storage and recycling, and drought contingency plans throughout western states like Arizona. It will mean fewer power outages and stronger, more reliable electricity grids by investing $65 billion in power infrastructure. It will mean better protections against wildfires by investing in fire suppression and recovery and the removal of hazardous fuels. It will mean stronger water and sanitation systems and better broadband access in tribal communities, as well as full funding for all currently authorized Indian water settlements. In Arizona, that includes the infrastructure for the Southern Arizona Indian Water Rights Settlement with the Tohono O'odham Nation, completing the Gila River Indian Community Water Rights Settlement, and funding the White Mountain Apache Tribe's Water Rights Settlement. Our legislation will mean safer, more convenient airports by investing $25 billion to repair and upgrade terminals, runways, taxiways, and air traffic control towers. It will mean the strongest investment ever in American public transit by expanding transit networks, improving accessibility, and funding the nation's transit repair backlog of thousands of buses, rail cars, stations, and thousands of miles of track, signals, and power systems. And it will mean the largest investment in clean energy transmission and electric vehicle infrastructure in U.S. history, electrifying thousands of school and transit buses, boosting critical material supply chains, and building out a national network of electric vehicle charging stations. And we achieve all of these goals without raising taxes on everyday Americans. Strong, reliable infrastructure represents more than pipes and pavement. It represents the opportunities for Americans to visit loved ones, for new businesses to open and compete globally, for veterans to access telemedicine, and children to learn in safe and effective ways. That's why our legislation has earned the support of such a wide cross-section of Americans. From the United States Chamber of Commerce to the AFL-CIO, from agricultural producers to clean energy leaders, from healthcare providers to transit advocates to local mayors, the list of experts and organizations that have endorsed our Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act is long enough to take an entire speech just to list them all. But don't worry, Mr. President, I won't. Rarely does federal legislation so directly address issues that matter to all our constituents. And rarer still does such historic legislation earn broad support in both parties. How many times have we heard in recent months that bipartisanship isn't possible anymore? We've been asked to accept a new standard by which important policy can only come together on a party line. And while Americans are more united than our politics would have you believe, we certainly face divisions. And unfortunately, it's now commonplace, and by some, even expected, for elected leaders to feed those divisions on a daily basis with extreme and hyperbolic rhetoric, all or nothing policy demands, and toxic partisan attacks. In Washington, palace intrigue and insider drama often steal the spotlight from important policy issues. But I promised Arizonans something different. I chose instead to follow the example of the late Senator John McCain, who, as the Arizona Republic recently recalled, refused to demonize the opposition party and worked to reach bipartisan agreements that tried to bring the country together. This infrastructure effort is a perfect example of how I work to deliver results for Arizona.
President, Mr. President, at long last, tomorrow morning, I expect that the Senate will approve the Bipartisan Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. For far too long, any discussion of transportation infrastructure in this country has been accompanied by the adjective crumbling. The backlog of needed repairs and upgrades and replacements in my state of Maine and throughout our country is simply enormous. Americans know far too well the consequences of the chronic underinvestment in our infrastructure. Poor road conditions cost them, on average, hundreds of dollars each year in vehicle repairs and wasted gasoline due to congestion. Structurally deficient bridges often require lengthy detours when they have to be posted. Slow or non-existent internet connections create barriers to work, healthcare, and education. The recent pandemic has certainly laid bare the inequities in access to high-speed internet in our country. Every administration in recent memory has identified improving our infrastructure and transportation networks as a priority, but time and time again, we have seen those ambitious goals thwarted by partisanship. Well, Mr. President, the Senate has finally broken through the political gridlock and is on the verge of passing a landmark infrastructure package that amounts to a major victory for the American people. I worked with my colleagues from across the aisle and across the country to produce this legislation. It will be the most significant investment in American infrastructure since the establishment of the interstate highway system in the 1950s. This bill will provide concrete benefits for American families as well as for our economy by making historic investments in our nation's roads, highways, bridges, airports, seaports, waterways, rail, water treatment systems, and of course, broadband. And Mr. President, this is important not only for American families, it's important for America's place in the world. Many other countries on a per capita basis invest far more than our country does in infrastructure, including China. So this bill will help to improve our competitiveness, create jobs, and improve our productivity. It represents the culmination of months of bipartisan negotiations and truly is transformational. For example, the package includes $110 billion to address the growing backlog of deficient bridges and roads. This includes $40 billion to improve our nation's bridges. In my state of Maine, there are 315 deficient bridges and nearly 1,500 miles of poor roads. This package provides $25 billion as well as flexibility for our airports so that they can pursue the projects such as rebuilding or extending runways and taxiways or expanding their terminals. This funding will benefit airports of all sizes. The package also bolsters our rail network by including funding for programs that support crucial capital and rail safety projects. We also included funding for Amtrak's national network to help address its deferred capital needs. and to bring new train cars to state-supported routes like the Downeaster in Maine. Mr. President, I'm also excited that the bill provides an additional $95 million to support the University Transportation Center program. This program harnesses the research and development expertise at our institutions of higher education to improve our infrastructure. The University of Maine, I'm proud to say, participates in this program. It is leading the way by pioneering cutting-edge materials to build more durable, environmentally friendly roads and bridges at a lower cost. I recently participated in a bridge dedication that used the new materials and techniques that have been developed at the University of Maine. This bridge will last far longer. It has, because of the materials that were used to build it, it has a far lower carbon footprint and is a really exciting development. And this program will be better supported by the funding in our bill. The energy title of our bill will provide critical investments in clean energy demonstration projects and help to protect and harden our electric grid. Notably, $355 million is included for an energy storage pilot program, which was authorized through a law I authored known as the BEST Act. I'm really excited about this because I believe that energy storage technology will be the breakthrough that we need in the fight against climate change, as far as allowing us to integrate more renewables such as wind and solar into the electric grid. That'll in turn, it will help to reduce emissions, but it will also improve the resiliency of our electric grid.
On this vote, the yeas are 69, the nays are 30. The bill as amended is passed.
Madam President.
Majority Leader.
Order.
The Senate will be in order, please.
And once again, congratulations to all of those who worked hard, so hard on this very significant and very important bill.
Yeah, where are we? Right here. Mr. President.
Hey guys, much appreciated.
We were wondering when you were going to stop for a moment after approving it.
I tell you what, I know what you mean. That's the only reason I did stop. Well, folks, I'm going to get you each a pen, but there's 30 of you up here. I only have one pen with me.
Just break it in 30 parts.
All right, Vice President, please.
All right.
Thank you.
Okay, here we go.
Yeah.
Bravo! Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Good job.
Everybody gets one.